But when you're talking about resources, we are so dependent on that material thing.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, those people,
What we see.
that stuff.
Tangible.
Right,
Yes.
what's
And what we see.
tangible.
Yes,
That's
right.
absolutely.
And it's usually why we stress during a crisis, because it's a loss of that tangible.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we're experiencing trials and tribulations in our lives at some point to some level.
Yes.
We know that.
Yes.
We've all experienced that.
Oh.
And something that was a big deal to you may not be a big deal to me.
Absolutely.
Something that I have experienced, you may be like, okay, well, I don't understand why you feel that way, because that's not important to you, right?
Yeah.
So we can't, we all have different perspectives, different feelings about things, different values, different belief systems,
right.
different ways we look at the world. Our worldview is very
Absolutely.
different.
Absolutely.
So we have to be careful when there is someone in crises to be empathetic
Have to be.
to the situation, to them, because, you know, we might not be able to relate.
That's right. That's right. I think about my brother-in-law was shot in the face while at work about 7 years ago. And I know that there was about 5 years there that I remember talking to other people who I knew had who had experienced trauma, a big crisis, right? And I'd said, you know, I just don't understand PTSD, for example. And can you talk to my brother-in-law? Can you help I remember asking a pastor that I'm good friends with who had experienced trauma, is a pastor, and could help my brother-in-law potentially in ways that I just couldn't relate to him. And so, you know, that I seeked that out, and because I just didn't relate to PTSD in any way. I just didn't know anything about it. And I kept saying that over and over. I found myself saying, gosh, I just don't know anything. And that's really what everybody that loved my brother-in-law, my husband, you know, his other brother, and you know, all these people, none of us related. It's so hard to watch someone hurting when you don't know how to help them. But you also, like you said, Lisa, you don't even understand what they're going through.
Empathy is very important.
It's very important.
But I like what you said too, Pastor Angela, when you said we really have to focus on God during crisis.
We do.
It's, I think, all we can do.
Yeah,
You know, so 2.5 years ago, my son, we had an accident in the home. My at the time 10-year-old son was shot with a 12-gauge shotgun in our home. And so, you know, I remember thinking many things throughout that process. He was in Vanderbilt in the hospital for 5 weeks, and that night he experienced a 6-hour surgery, and of course was whisked away into that and so much other. But you have shock. A lot of people that are going through crisis have shock and can actually look somewhat okay and normal, but yet they're barely functioning. And so that's where the empathy comes, and I think too at times even, you know, some sympathy. But what happens is, for me personally, when I went through that crisis, all I could think about constantly was God. All I could do was think vertically. And everything I did, everything I said, every breath, because I mean, there were moments where I wasn't sure I was going to live. You know, I genuinely did not know if I was going to be able to live through this, especially if I lost my son. And so we didn't know what the future held, was he going to walk again, what was going to happen. And so I think, you know, when we are thinking about that, it was just such a digging deep in the midst of a crisis, and realizing, you know, Jesus is really all we have.
Yes.
yeah.
And that if we'll just cling to him.
Yeah, Jesus is so big to us.
Yes.
God is, you know, he's the Alpha, he's the Omega. And oftentimes when we experience crisis, he is the first person that we think of.
Yes. Yes.
Now here's the thing. He's the first person that we call to for help, but oftentimes he is also the first person we blame.
Absolutely.
Lord, why did you let this happen?
Yeah.
That's so very true.
Lord, why didn't you stop this?
That is so
Why
true.
didn't you do something? But that says that he is big to us He is so big to us that we expect something to happen from him. We expect intervention because he can do it.
As you were talking about your son, I too, when I was a single mother, my son was shot living in Chicago. But the most miraculous thing about it was before it even happened, God revealed it to me, the plan that the enemy had to take my son out. We lived in a place where we saw young men shot down on a regular basis. But I just, because I was saved, I love the Lord, and I said, God, I said, if I walk away from you, who's going to pray for my children? So I began to pray, and God would reveal dreams and different things to me, so vivid, and he showed me what the enemy had planned for my son. And I began to pray that God would just turn it away, turn this thing away. And so I'm at work, and one day my phone rings, and it's my neighbor. She said, your son has been shot. Immediate shock. But God, immediately after that, he spoke. He said, what did you ask me to do? And I just calmed down. I went to my manager. I said, I have to leave. I said, my son has been shot. He said, what? And I said, it's okay. It's all right. And I should have taken a cab, but I was in shock. I got on the bus, took the bus all the way home. Instead of taking a cab, I was just calm in my own way, but still in shock, but just handling it. And I was just talking to the Lord all the way on the bus ride home, just talk to the Lord. And as soon as I got to my car, the media, they met me at the door. They met me at my car, and I was calm. And so many people that saw it later, they said, Mom, she was so calm as she was talking. But I just remember what I asked God to do. And he reminded me, he said, you asked me to turn it away. He said, I've turned it away.
It's so interesting because before we started, we did not know each other's stories, so this is interesting. But the Lord had given me a warning dream 5 days before. It was an hour before the accident. God revealed to me what the last snake in the dream meant, and that was that an attack was coming. And so I thought, you know what, I'm not going to worry about this because I'll never guess what it is. Boy, was I right? And I said, plus, I don't know if it's going to be 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 years. Little did I know it was an hour away. But what I will say to you is that I was calm because I knew God never wastes a word.
Hallelujah.
And so I sat there, and all I could keep thinking, there had been a number of things that had happened that morning as well that only my son and I knew, this particular son, because I have 2 boys. And so I was thinking about those things as well, and just knew that God had even been preparing my son. His name is Carson, and he had even been preparing Carson that very morning.
Wow.
And so because my son came in and said, Mama, I've got an idea for one of my segments on your radio show. And I said, oh, good. You know, we've been working on this upcoming series that he was going to do called Carson's Thoughts. And he said, well, Mama, you know how sometimes people are going through something really big? And I said, uh-huh. And he said, I was sitting at the kitchen table this morning, and it came to me, Mama, as I was eating my cereal. He said, you know, they should pray about it. And so when my son was pulled off the ambulance on his gurney, and they were getting him into the emergency room, and I was standing there, and I said, oh, Carson, baby. And he looked at me and said, Mama, will you please pray for me? And I thought, wow, you know, this 10-year-old little boy with so much wisdom, but God had been preparing him, and he had been preparing me.
Wow. And you know, God is faithful to do
Yes.
that. He is so faithful. He also prepared me for my mother's death. I was sitting in our living room, and right off the living room was my parents' bedroom. So I was sitting in a seat that was right into the doorway of her bedroom. And I remember feeling concern for my mother. She just, you know, she had experienced some depression. And I just remember this feeling of concern come over me. And I heard as if a man was standing right there next to me, it's time for your mother to rest. I thought, yeah, Mom needs some rest. You know, remember, I'm 16 at the time. Like, yeah, Mom needs some rest. Well, at 17, she committed suicide right in the front part, in that doorway of her bedroom. I did not know that was the kind of rest that was coming. But my family was also surprised at my calm. Part of that calm was shock, because she shot herself while we were in the home, and I was the first to see her. So of course, shock. You talk
Shock.
about PTSD, experienced
yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
But there was also, and I tell people this, there was a piece that I can't even explain.
That's right. Yeah.
From the time I saw her till now, there's a piece that I cannot explain. I had a relationship with Christ. I got saved when I was 13. I had a relationship with Christ. I knew the love of God. I blamed him for allowing her to die. She chose to shoot herself. Her choice. She is absolutely responsible for that. But I blamed him for allowing her to die. Some people survive gunshot wounds. Why couldn't she? That was, you know, as a teenager, in my mind, why couldn't you save my mother?
Right, right.
I remember that really hindered our relationship. You know, I still went through the motions, but there was still some distance there because, God, I love you. I know you're good, but you let my mom die.
There was some resentment.
So this build-up finally came to a head when he called me back to him. And when I rededicated my life back to him, I asked the question. Well, of course, he didn't answer me. It was, we're not going to be concerned about that. Let's have this relationship. Let's build this relationship. And he spent the next couple of years building our relationship, showing me how to build our relationship, showing me how to become intimate with him again, and even more so, because I was, you know, I was 22, 23. It got to a point where I had such a love for him and such a honor for him being God that I wasn't concerned about that answer anymore.
Because we are free will.
We are. And you know, but we can get to a point in our relationship with Christ, and a lot of people don't realize it at the time when they're in their pain, when they're in their hurt, when they're in their anger, that he can redeem that relationship. He can soften, he can deliver, he can heal.
Yes.
All of those things that we go through.
Power to live.